Thank you very much, Nikki, and good afternoon, everyone. Just really from my point of view to welcome you all here and looking forward to this really interesting webinar, at which really we're hoping to cover some useful and interesting things for you. So I'm going to gradually move through the slides, and obviously we will be hoping that you will put some comments, and we will have some questions for you during the presentation. So please do use the chat box and let us know what thoughts you have. So here you can see this is the cover of the booklet that we have produced here at the Rees Centre. It's called Teenagers in Foster Care, and I'm pleased to say it's been very popular. So we're going to try and give you a sort of sense of what it consists of. This is just a page. You can see this page is about structure and boundaries, rules and sanctions, one of the most difficult things for foster carers, I think, particularly with teenagers. And then here we've got the actual contents, so you can just see the sorts of things we cover: adolescent development, attachment, and the foster care experience, and so on. And during this presentation, I'm particularly going to focus on number 5, the stage framework. So stay tuned, because I will be talking a bit more about that in a minute. Okay, so then we've got just to highlight the fact that it isn't just a booklet which just has lots of information. It also has some things which we hope will get you thinking and get you talking. So what we've tried to do is, for every chapter, we've got top tips, which you can see here, and then we also got discussion points. And we're hoping that you will be able to use these in discussion when you're talking either to your partner, maybe even to the young people themselves in your supervisions or in any groups that you attend. So we tried to make it as interactive as possible, as interesting as possible to you, because that seems to us to be very important. Now, I just want to say a little bit about the background to the booklet. It didn't come out of nowhere, obviously, and the Rees Centre, one of the things that I admire so much in the work of the Rees Centre is that, you know, they really do. Can you adjust the volume, please, because you're very quiet? It's okay. Okay, so volume is being adjusted. Please keep letting us have the feedback. So yes, so the work of the Rees Centre is very much based on research, and the booklet is comes out of a series of seminars, all of which involve the presentation of research. So we really feel that we want, you know, to have our work and the work of the Rees Centre based in research. Second thing is it brings knowledge about teenage development to the foster care situation. I particularly myself feel very strongly that, you know, we do know quite a lot about teenage development, and it seems to be very important that foster carers have the opportunity of learning a bit about this research. I think very often the research sort of sits in one box in a sort of academic setting. We want to make sure that that is used and is usable for foster carers. We recognize the challenges for foster carers, of course, particularly with teenagers. However, we also know that this can be a very rewarding journey, and it is a journey, and I'll talk a bit about the process in a minute. We also believe very strongly in the need for support for foster carers. I think that all the work that the Rees Centre does, and certainly all the contacts I've had with foster carers, you know, it's so clear that this can be a very, very difficult task, and the more support that's available for foster carers, the better. We did think that we might just, before we actually start, we might just mention a few top tips, and these are very much, you know, derived, or very much integral in the booklet. So first of all, if you're feeling very stressed, if you're feeling worried, concerned, just try and take a step back. Put yourself in the young person's shoes. What are they feeling? What are they going through? That sometimes can be very helpful. I know myself in working with very troubled young people, where your own feelings get very, rather strong about the behaviour. Just trying to, make that a sort of emotional step backwards and think about what the young person is going through. Recognize that adjustment does take time. Things, particularly during this adolescent period, and it is it's a stage, it's a process, and things don't happen overnight. They take months, sometimes years. Do think about the age and stage of the young person, just to recognize that not all teenagers are the same. So a 13-year-old is not going to be the same as a 15 or a 16-year-old. Their needs are going to be different. Just keep in mind age and stage. Building trust is a complicated process, and that's particularly the case, obviously, for young people who've had a number of experiences where trust has broken down, and often trust has been damaged and undermined by adults who haven't recognized the needs, haven't been able to provide for the young person. So just remember that it takes time and it's a complicated process and it doesn't happen very quickly. We often talk about something called a trainee adult, and this is a concept that I think foster carers and parents find quite useful. And it's really about the fact that this individual teenager is really sort of halfway through a journey from being a child to being an adult. And before they get to being an adult, there's a time when they've got to learn, and they've got to learn what adult behavior is about. They've got to learn what is growing up, what is mature behavior. And this trainee adult, if you've got a trainee in a work situation, you don't expect them to get everything right the first time. We do expect people to make mistakes. That's what a trainee is. And sometimes if you can think about young people in this way, when they have messed up, when they have made mistakes, when they've got things wrong, when they've irritated you beyond belief, thinking about them as being in the process of training, learning about what being an adult is, can be very helpful. And then, don't expect gratitude. It does take an awful lot of time to recognize that people are doing things for you. Okay. So I'm going to move on now, and what I want to do is to talk about this stage framework. Now, this is a framework that I've developed myself and talked to all the people at the Rees Centre about. And the reason we've suggested this as a framework for today is that it seems to us that it's very important to have some sort of something easy to get hold of in terms of what young people need during this stage of development. And so the stage framework really tries to get hold of some key factors to help you think about the young person that you are working with or living with. So we called it the stage framework for two reasons. First of all, because this is a stage. It is a stage, and that's very helpful, because if you think about it as a stage, then you recognize that it isn't going to, it isn't going to end tomorrow. You aren't going to have the perfect young person tomorrow. The stage is a process. It takes time to work through. But it's also called the stage framework because each of the letters, S, T, A, G, E, stand for some absolutely key things. And I'm going to go through those in a minute. But first, let me just say something else. You can see on this slide, I've got a few bullet points here. First of all, this is a new approach for effective foster care. We haven't done this before. It's not been published before. So it is something new. It's a new way of thinking about foster care for teenagers. It's based on the key things that young people need. And this really comes from research. So we know quite a lot about what works well for young people, what young people need. So the things in the stage framework come from research, based on research evidence. It doesn't cover everything. Obviously, it's trying to put things in a relatively easily memorable, short something that you can hold on to, but it does provide some very useful signposts for those caring for teenagers. So I'm going to now just try and tell you a little bit about the framework. So I mentioned that it's called stage because this is a stage, and keep that in mind. You know, we do sometimes, I think, when we're living with teenagers, we do sort of hope that and expect that, you know, they will manage, they will grow up, they won't be as challenging as they have been. But we have to remember that they're going through a process. So here are the 5 letters. And the S stands for significance. What that means is that the adult, the carer, is really, really important. And I'm going to say a little bit about why that is and why your role as a carer is so important. Second thing is the T, that stands for two-way communication. All too often, when we're communicating with young people, I'm afraid, we tend to use one-way communication. That is, we're either telling them something or asking them something. But often, we're not really listening. Two-way communication involves listening as well as talking. The A stands for authority. How do we exercise authority in these very difficult and challenging situations? G for the generation gap. And why that's there is because growing up today is really so different from growing up when you and I were teenagers, and recognizing some of those differences is really important. Finally, E for emotion. Now, you could say this is the most important thing because it's not only the emotion of the teenager, but it's also the emotion of the adult. When you have both teenager and adult with very strong feelings, things can be quite difficult. So I'm going to talk about each of these things, and then I'm also going to put up on the screen a question after each one, which you might like to respond to. Send us a little note in the chat box so that we know that you're there and we know what you're thinking. We obviously hope that this is useful to you, but any response from you is really, really good. It's also important to say that we've got a very large number of people. In fact, the numbers are going up all the time. So we just important to say that we may not have time to answer all your questions, but we will take seriously your questions. And any questions that we don't have time to address today, we will be sure to give a response as part of a blog post on our website. So we've got over 50 people attending, which is a great number. So I hope you're all there and active and you know, enjoying it. And if I could see you all, I'd be waving and saying hello and asking you how you're getting on with your teenager. But I can't do that. But I hope that you're really enjoying it, and we're enjoying doing it. So it's great that we've got the number that we have. So I'm going to put up now oh yes, sorry, I will, sorry, slight technical hitch. Oh yes, okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay, so here is the first of the 5 letters of stage. And this is the word significance. And this is really important because the fact is that adults matter hugely during the stage of development. Very often, adults feel that they might have been important when the individual was a child, and we know what the role of adults is with younger children. But sometimes it feels as if we as adults don't have the same role with teenagers. However, we do know that, in fact, adults play just as important a role as with younger children. It's just a different role. Adults often think they don't matter, and I, I've spent quite a lot of time with carers of teenagers and parents of teenagers, and what they say is there are two things that really make you feel, or three things maybe, that make you feel you don't matter. First of all, teenagers tend to push you away. They say they don't want to listen to you, they're not interested in your opinions, and so on. So that's the first thing. They push you away. The second thing is that they often will give the impression they much prefer to talk to their friends than they would to you. And the third thing is that they make you feel as if you don't have a role. And that's all part of this process. But, and this is a really big but, all the research shows that outcomes for young people are affected by the engagement and involvement of key adults. And I can give you lots of examples of this. What's the variable that makes most difference to school achievement? It's having an adult who really cares about what you're doing and is involved and supportive. What's the variable that makes most difference to health outcomes? It's having a supportive adult. Self-esteem is the same thing. So even though you may feel that your teenager, the teenager you're caring for, is pushing you away, is telling you you're rubbish, you are completely out of date, you're ruining their lives, the fact is you need to stick in there because you are really, really important. Now, we thought that we might have some questions here, so please do pop a note in the chat box. Okay, so can you give an example of something that you have been able to do to show that adults are important at this stage? I won't give you any hints, but there are lots of obvious examples. So anyone who has found a way of showing to your teenager, even though they're not very interested in what you've got to say, to show them how important your role is at this stage. We'd really like to hear from you, and so do pop it in the chat box if you'd like to do that. I'm going to move on to the next one now, if I can. Here we go. So we need to go to, yeah, okay. Now, the next thing is two-way communication, and this is incredibly important because communication does break down during this stage. One of the things that I think is most frequently said to me when I do groups with foster carers or parents, they say, why is communication broken down? What can I do about this? When you talk to teenagers, they say, well, one of the problems with communicating with adults is they're either trying to get information out of you, in other words, they're interrogating you, or they're nagging, they're telling you what to do. So all of you listening today, just think about how you talk to your teenager. Are you doing one of those things? Are you asking them, and it feels like to them interrogating, or are you telling them things they ought to do? Communication, if it's really effective, has to be two-way. It has to involve listening as well as talking. And adults are just so central here because this is the time when young people are learning communication skills. They're learning those, even though they don't appear to be, from you. How you're managing communication, you as the key adult, will really make a difference. So listening, hearing what the young person has got to say, even though it may be irritating to you or it may not seem appropriate or whatever it is, you won't be able to get your message across unless you give the sense to the young person that you really are listening to them. Now, people often say, but teenagers don't want to talk, or often they say, it's a grunt generation, they don't seem to talk. But of course, that isn't true because, hang on. Okay. Teenagers do want to talk, but it's at times that feel safe for them, and they want to talk about things that are, appropriate. And if you think about it, there's so many changes going on for young people, so many things inside them that they're not sure about, that there is caution and you know, sort of holding back before they can share things. But teenagers do want to talk, and they're very, very talkative. You just got to sit and see how they are with their friends. So it's up to us as adults to find the right time to make sure that we show them that we're listening, and just to recognize what's happening inside them. Tell them to get across to them, if you like, that you are there to listen. Okay, so I've just had a very, there's a good comment in the chat box. Let the young person know that they can tell me anything, good or bad. And Liz, great, I really agree with that. I think that being able to get that message across, because often, you know, on the part of the young person, there's shame, there's embarrassment, there's feeling you've messed up, you know, going back to what I was saying about the trainee adult made mistakes and so on. So being able to get that message across that they can tell you and you're not going to judge, and this is something we're going to come on to in a minute. Okay, so Rita says, tell them you're not here to judge them, and I'm going to talk about judging in a minute. Yes, I just did that. Okay, it's me they call if something has gone wrong and they need help for a lift or money. Absolutely. Well, I know that can be very, very irritating, but that's very important, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to move on now. Thank you for the responses. That's working very well. Okay, so this is some of the things you've done already. If there's anyone else who'd like to add in some more ideas about things that you can do to improve communication, that's great. Okay, someone here, oh, there's a long one here from Mandy. Oh, now we'll take the next one. Refrain from the urge to tell them who they should have as friends. Listen to whom they go out with. Choose your time to offer your observations. Absolutely right. And I think this thing about telling them, you know, that one of the things that's happening at this time is gradually that they are becoming independent people. They are making choices. They've got to learn that sometimes their friends that they choose won't necessarily be the best friends, but allowing them that opportunity to learn is really important. If they don't have that, well, they won't learn, obviously. And choose your time. Thank you very much. And Shan here has said, listen, really listen, and I so much agree with that. I'm going to move on now because we've got quite a lot of things to deal with. Sorry, we have gone far too far. It's just to, I think the next one is authority. And one of the things I think that probably people find most difficult, both carers and parents, is how to exercise authority during this stage. And we all know that with younger children, we know we have power, we know how to exercise our authority, but how do you do it with a young person who can be very challenging and won't either do what you want them to do, or if you do try and be authoritative, they will push you away. Now, one of the things that we've learned, and this comes from research, is that there is a particular way of parenting which has the best outcomes for young people. It doesn't always work, but broadly speaking, as a way of sort of summarizing things, it's what we call the authoritative parenting style. And authoritative means confident in yourself, but not authoritarian. So these are the things that are part of this authoritative parenting style. Some of you may know this already, so I apologize if you do. But let me just go through these things. So first of all, obviously warmth, nurturance, care, love if appropriate, but that has to be combined with structure, because young people really do need structure. They need to know that there are boundaries. And I recently attended an event run by the Rees Centre, and we had a young woman there who was a care leaver, and she made a very, very important point about structure, because she'd had some very, very bad experiences. But at the very end of her time, I think when she was almost 16 or 17, she finally ended up in a placement which worked for her, where there was structure. And she made the point that if you're in a situation, if you're in a placement where there's no structure, it feels as if the carer really is not interested in you. And when she finally ended up with a carer who did provide the structure, even though, of course, she didn't like it and she kicked against it and so on, but the message was that the carer she was really important. Her welfare, the outcome for her was really important, and that's why the structure was in place. And the other thing about structure, which is very important, is that if there isn't a structure, young people don't feel safe. Structure means safety. And of course, young people will transgress, they will resist, they will argue, they'll kick up a fuss, they'll have temper tantrums, which are really just like the temper tantrums of 3-year-olds, but they'll obviously do it in a different way. But this is so important to provide these boundaries, because without boundaries, young people will never be able to internalize for themselves the boundaries, but they will also find themselves, without that sort of security, that containment, which is so incredibly important. Next thing is autonomy promotion. I've already mentioned that young people are going through this process of gradually becoming more independent. And we as adults, carers, have to find ways of allowing that to happen and helping them. It may not necessarily be allowing them out, but it may be about being autonomous in respect of your beliefs, your values, getting them to think through things, getting them to take responsibility in the house, whatever it is, but promoting more responsibility is very important. The next thing is setting clear expectations. So how can young people know if they have succeeded or not unless they know what you expect? So no expectations means not really, they don't really care. Setting expectations, but being clear with the young person about what you expect of them is really important. And then finally, of course, it's about negotiation, because the more it feels as if you are telling them what to do, the less likely you are to find a reasonable compromise. Negotiation at this time is absolutely essential. So we're going to move on to the, hang on a second, we're going to move on to the question which we've got here. So the question is, it's sometimes hard to enforce boundaries with teenagers. Why is this so important? And I'm going to see if some of the comments here, which I can pick up. We need to go back a bit. Yes, so I haven't got the name here. Kim Ford, yes, I agree. If you don't follow through, then they don't take you seriously the next time. That's absolutely right. And sometimes, if you're feeling exhausted, if you're feeling worn down by the continual battles, it is very easy not to follow through. That sort of consistency does take a lot of emotional energy, if you like. But you are so right, Kim, because, of course, if there isn't that follow-through, if there isn't follow-through, then the structure doesn't feel very strong. The boundaries aren't clear. And, of course, that, again, makes young people feel unsafe and also not cared for. So, yes, I really, really agree with you. I think that's a very good point. Okay, here's some from Marie. Marie Pierce, I find having a chat while in the car works. Very good, Marie, as you're not expecting them to look at you and they tend to open up better. That's so important. And it is that sort of eye contact that if the teenager doesn't feel that they're being, the spotlight isn't on them so they can open up, right. Okay, so here we are, another one here. Oh, this might have been from Marie. It's a bit difficult to see exactly. No, this is from Sharon. Boundaries need to be set so that the young person can learn to take responsibility for their actions, whether it be timekeeping, budgeting, pocket money, etc. Exactly right. So this goes back to the trainee adult, that learning to take responsibility is absolutely essential. Because if you think about it, if they don't, okay, their name is above. Okay, fine. So sorry, Marie, got you confused here, but this is your point about boundaries need to be set so a young person can take responsibility. Yeah, I really, really agree. And I'll just take one more here, if I can find it. This is Sharon. Preparation for expectations in adult life. Exactly right. And this is my point about a trainee adult. Marie, this will help them to become independent. Yvonne, also important to explain to the youngster why the boundaries are in place. Absolutely right. And how they benefit the teenager themselves. Exactly. And the point is, to explain that is so important because that helps them to see that they are important to you. Why are you putting these boundaries in place? Because you care about them. You care about their welfare. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be going through all this hassle. So yeah, absolutely right. Okay, good stuff. Now we're going to go on to right. The next one is the generation gap. Sometimes people say, well, why have you got the G in there, the generation gap? I think this is very important. And the reason I think it's important is because we do tend to judge. And we do tend to judge based on our own experiences. That's perfectly normal. We have values which are based on our own experiences and so on. But what is really critical to keep in mind is that growing up today is not the same as it was when we were teenagers. And I can give you lots of examples about that. One of the things I think, let me just go through these and then I'll come to an example. So adults grew up when things were very different. We simply cannot compare the world of today. And, adults may want to hold on to their values, but it is so important to recognize that young people are having different experiences today. And one of the things that I really, I know from talking to teenagers is how hard it is to feel that adults are judging you all the time. And we have to be careful not to do that. And I sometimes give, there are lots of examples. The internet is one obvious example, which some of you may want to mention. But one of the things I think is really worth keeping in mind is the whole issue of sex and sexuality. That it's a completely different experience today, not just in terms of the sorts of things that people see on movies or online, but also the way in which young people talk about sex, the way in which people experience sex, and even to do with gender. The young people are experiencing a world in which being either male or female is not quite so clear as it used to be. The boundaries have shifted, and all these things really make growing up today a very different experience. And when we are interacting with young people, when we're trying to help them, get things right, have good relationships and so on, we just have to remember how different the experiences are. So I think having the G in stage does really make is an important thing. Okay, I'm going to just okay, so Fred here, I think it's important to offer sound rationale for boundaries. Exactly, as this helps understanding and buy-in from young people. Okay, good. Okay, Kelly, really positive story. Shan, working together is a great idea. It really reinforces the care behind structure and boundaries. Rita, that's when negotiation can come into play. Yep. And Kim, it's difficult for adults. Oh, okay, this is one about the G. From Kim, it's difficult for adults now as well as teenagers because their outlook on life is so wide compared to our world when we were kids. Yes, that's a good point, because they're seeing the world in a very different way. They're exposed to the media in a different way, and of course they're online all the time, and they're experiencing other young people's growing up in a much more extended way. I think that's a good point. Okay, Right, so we're going to go on now. We're doing very well in terms of time, folks, you'll be pleased to hear. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. I'm going to go to 19, which is E. I often think, I may be wrong, I think all these things in the stage framework are incredibly important, but I do think the E is a key one. And the reason for this is because the teenagers' emotions are very volatile. This is partly to do with brain development. We know we've learned a huge amount about the brain in the last few years. And one of the things we know is that we used to talk about hormones. We used to say teenagers' emotions all over the place because of hormones. But now we know that the structure of the brain is actually playing a part here. The bit of the brain that's to do with emotion, sensation, and arousal, that's the amygdala, is maturing, and it's maturing rapidly, but it isn't settled. And that amygdala and the overactive element there in that part of the brain really can make managing your emotions very difficult. But also, of course, adults themselves feel very strong emotions. Teenagers are very good at making adults feel very emotional. And this may be, the obvious one is anger, irritation, frustration, even fury. But also adults feel other things. I talk to a lot of adults at this stage who feel quite a lot of sadness. They feel that they've lost something. They feel that this isn't the child they knew. They feel that they have experienced loss because what they've got in the family is someone who isn't interacting, doesn't want a family life, and so on. But teenagers are also very good at making adults feel guilty, feel ashamed. You haven't got it right, you're not doing it well, you're not doing it properly, you're making a mess, you're ruining my life. You know that phrase very well. Now, when you've got two people in a relationship, both of whose emotions are very volatile, you know, this can lead to a very explosive situation. So these emotions get in the way of good relationships and of communication. So it's incredibly important for foster carers to learn to manage their own difficult emotions. This is central. And I hope that in the supervision that you're getting, in the work that you do with other foster carers, and indeed in the relationship you have with your partner, if you have a partner, these sorts of things can be managed. We as adults have to learn to take a step back. We have to learn to manage our emotions in order to help the young person with what we call emotion regulation. Because if we can't manage our emotions, if we get caught up in these very strong feelings of whatever it is, shame, guilt, sadness, or anger, then that is really, really hard for the young person to learn how to manage their emotions, or indeed how to manage the relationship. So really, really important here. And I think that one of the key things for any of us who are living with teenagers is to be able to work through managing our emotions, because if we can do that and if we can learn to really listen, relationships will definitely improve. So we've got a question here. Teenagers often provoke strong emotions in adults. How's the best way to deal with these feelings? So the first one I can see from Marie, it's also very important to say sorry if we get it wrong. I think that's good. And that's difficult to do, isn't it, Marie? We're not always necessarily good at doing that, but it's all part, I think. It's a broader thing, really. It's not just saying sorry. It's also being able to acknowledge some of our feelings, you know, to be able to say to the young person, I felt really, really angry today about what you did. I want us to talk about it. I want to share that. Anya has just said, telling young people that emotions of any kind are normal and we all feel emotions is also extremely important. So all this is part of being willing to be open with our young people. It's not hiding behind our adult self, if you like. It's allowing us to be real people. But Rita here is saying everything to a teenager is a big drama, react appropriately, don't feel their need for a response. So that's important too, and that's part of what I'm saying, being able to stand back. You don't need to suddenly jump in and say, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Teenagers will say that their life is ruined, that you've ruined their lives. So here's Roger. I would suggest that foster carers should be trained to at least level 3 in counselling skills. Yep, that's good. I agree with that, Roger. It's really helped me listen better and be more empathetic, as well as understanding my own emotions. Yep, I agree. And here's Liz. Sorry, just go back a bit and see if we can find Liz. If I feel my own feelings getting out of hand, I ask my partner to take over the communication and step back myself. Brilliant, thank you. And Roger says, I'd be happy to do that. Fred says, take time out for yourself to reflect and remind yourself that presenting behaviors often relate to past traumas. How true. Yeah, stop, listen, and take time out. Thank you all. You've all making some very good comments here. Okay. So let's have a conclusion here. So we're pretty well running towards the end of this. Just to say a little bit more about the booklet. The booklet has a lot of very useful information. Obviously, I've talked about the STAGE framework today because we felt that was a way of getting into some of these things. And you, in your comments in the chats, have been really, really helpful. That's very, very good. There's more, obviously, about some of the things we haven't covered. We haven't talked about risk-taking, for example. There will be many other things. I mentioned sexuality, but only very briefly. There'll be lots of other things, mental health issues and so on, that you will want to know more about. But please use the booklet because, as I said at the beginning, there are top tips, but there are also discussion points, things for you to share with others and to use in training and supervision. We feel that's really important. And we know that, prompts for discussion, prompts for things that give a way into discussing some of these really, really difficult things can be very helpful to you. Now, Natalie says, going to mention counselling to my social worker to see if she can facilitate. Thank you for that. Marie, oh my goodness, we're getting so many comments here. Oinya, Natalie, I like it that you take time out. It's teaching young people about what they can do if they feel like that. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing because you will be able to do it. And Maureen, there may be something else going on and you need to look beyond what they're actually saying. Thank you, Maureen. Good point. Okay, well, we're coming to the end here. We've got a few more slides, but I think we're pretty well at the end. Are there any questions people would just like to put in very, very last if we've got a few minutes left? If not, we'll obviously, there'll be opportunity. Obviously, you can email the Rees Centre at any time. There's a blog which you can use. And obviously, one of the things that I can do now to say, the Rees Centre is the most wonderful organisation. I admire it hugely, and it's a source of a huge range of useful information for foster carers. And so I encourage you to become involved. I encourage you to learn more about the Rees Centre, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Someone's just said, I really enjoyed this presentation, well spoken and interesting, and whoever said that, oh, Kim, thank you very much, Kim, and I'm sorry I can't meet you all and see you face to face, but hopefully at some other time I will be able to do that, and I'm now going to close down sorry, I'm going to move on to the next slide because that gives you the information that you need about the Rees Centre, and you can see there there's a link to the Teenagers in Foster Care. So thanks very much, everyone, and hope that you, oh, Judy's saying you want me to go on. Is there another one? Yeah. How you can be involved. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Technology. Okay, so here's things you can do to be involved with the Rees Centre, and I'm not the Rees Centre, so I can honestly say that's a great organization, and it has helped enormous number of foster carers. So good for the Rees Centre, and thank you very much all of you for listening, and good afternoon. Good, that was good, great.